Welcome back to the podcast. Okay, this has been a tricky question to respond to. I've actually hit stop and re-record a number of times. This is a question that comes up a lot in my free spaces when I am presenting about the power of processing your emotions, or I'm talking about certain conditions where people feel like their emotions are the reason they have manifested this experience. The question is, isn't this re traumatizing to go back into your past and rehash your past? I definitely want to speak to this. First of all, we're not actually rehashing your past with my way that I get people to process their emotions using the release process. But what I want to share, and probably why I've hit stop and record again on this so many times, is the fear of being misunderstood. But what I've come to trust in my work is that I speak to a certain person. And if you find yourself getting a little bit triggered, getting a little bit defensive, wanting to shoot me an email saying, you've said this wrong, then maybe just sit and observe that. Maybe go and listen to previous episodes so that you can hear where I'm coming from. Okay. Because in a podcast, I am trying to cater for a lot of people, but at the same time, I've got to stay true to what I've seen and what I know helps people. So I want to speak about the word trauma first. And that is that I say to people, you move through life experience, events, experiences, and for some of you, you're going to call that trauma. But all of these events, experiences, and this trauma is associated with emotions. So for me, trauma is just simply a stored emotion. Okay. An experience is associated with emotions. So I can get into all of the little nuances, but if we just simplify it, because it truly is so simple, it just comes back to stored and unprocessed emotions. That's usually why you've come by my work, is because you want to learn how to process your emotions. Okay, so that's just a little bit of context. And then here are the three reasons why I feel someone would ask this question, because I've been asked it a number of times. Sometimes I get the opportunity to actually interact with the person and find out which of these reasons is it. So, first of all, it may be that you have experienced through a practitioner, through an emotional modality or therapy course or a group, the experience of being re traumatized. Okay, and this is where I hesitate a little bit, is that some people use trauma like another label, like another diagnosis, and then re-traumatizing is another label on top of another label. Okay. And so the people I work with who get results, they see that and they're willing to work with it and change that, because we just come back to processing emotions. So the first reason is that you may have experienced what you call re-traumatization yourself. The second reason is that you may have been in groups before, you may have a friend where you have seen them experience re-traumatization, or they have told you about this horrible experience where they did this therapy and it re-traumatized them. And then the third reason is because a lot of people that I work with do love the world of emotions. So that means that you've read a lot of books, you're very good intellectually with emotions, but you're actually still in your head, not in your body, by the way, is that you have heard about re traumatization. And so then you've got either all three of these or one of these that you're wondering, is this going to happen for you? And so then you've instilled this fear that stops you actually giving this process a go. And so, in a nutshell, I'm not going to get into what re traumatization is. Some people call it being like really triggered. It's like when all of those overwhelming feelings, emotions, and sensations come up and they essentially paralyze you. Okay. So maybe I do another episode on my view of re traumatization. This is something that will often come up in my groups, and we have a really healthy, open discussion around it. And I usually teach them about it from my perspective. Okay. So here's the thing is that people often feel like they know, or they think they know what the experience is, the traumatic event that they have got to process on. And what I have found is they can be right, and that might be the area that they've got to work on, Or they might be setting themselves up for such high expectations, going for the biggest, nastiest, hardest thing that they haven't been able to touch. And actually, they're missing all of the other opportunities to be able to help them just work on themselves on a whole. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So they could be right, they could be wrong that this event, this experience, this trauma is actually the thing that's going to set them free. At the end of the day, as I said, if we just keep it really simple, if you just start processing your emotions, even on some of the most basic events, then this is going to help you. And this actually leads me into my advice. If someone has got that fear, I am not going to push you into it. I mean, this is also why I'm such a huge advocate for you having support on your emotional journey, because sometimes you project these fears or you look at it from a lens that actually closes you off from the opportunity. I've got to process this trauma. It was big, it was nasty. I can't even think about it. I can't even contemplate going back into the past in it. So I'm just not going to start at all. So, if this is you and you're worried or concerned about re traumatizing by going back into past events, even applying the release process, that's just simply where we don't start. We've got to build safety in the body. And that's not just through grounding or meditation or taking it slowly necessarily. It's about being in a space where you can learn a process. So it's the release process that I use that I've created to help people for this exact reason is that if you have had a big traumatic event and you feel like it is impacting your life, your health, and you're noticing repeating patterns, all of these more subtle repeating patterns that you're aware of are great places to start. Okay. And it doesn't even have to be related to the trauma. This is where I'm saying you can just start with processing any event, any experience, and especially the ones that you feel like they've got no significance, and start applying the release process and seeing what comes up. Because if you go for something really big, challenging, potentially re traumatizing, if you don't apply it in the right way at the right time for you, then it becomes more challenging. It becomes harder to stay in it with your mind and your body. And this is where I say the human comes in and just butchers the process and then says it didn't work or says it re traumatized me. Okay. And so we just start on really, really basic events, even if it doesn't feel relevant. And I often use the example of like, were you triggered in the supermarket last week? Were you annoyed by someone on the road? Just start with that because it could be that big past event. It could be multiple of them. Not everyone experiences trauma in their life. Remember, trauma is an experience of an event, not the event itself. So some people have all these cumulative small events that result in the way their body presents physically, the way they communicate, the way they behave. All right. So that's why we can just simplify it and just start. Just start on the most mundane things. But then people will say to me, why would I do that? I'm like, well, because you're not starting with this. So let's just get started somewhere. And I recorded a podcast episode not too long ago. We'll put it in the show notes. It's about the power of positive releases. So I will see someone try and go back to where they think they need to go to. And sometimes that's because they haven't shared enough of their history with me to give them some direction as to what they can release on. And that's fine. They've just got to go on their own journey. And maybe I'll say, can you give me a little bit more information? And I will direct you with releases. We start with easy ones. Sometimes we just start with a positive release. And of course, people go, but I didn't come here to work on the positive stuff. I came here to work on the negative. Yes, but this is an entry point. Okay. So that's why I think it's really important to have guidance and support, but also, most importantly, to be open to the guidance and support and having someone see what you're not able to see. So if you build safety in a structure, in a process, structure and a process, masculine structure, it creates safety for you. Okay. And you go for easier stuff and you build yourself a solid foundation. And as your body learns to trust you, your nervous system begins to trust you, and you start to feel comfortable in like little experiences of emotions coming up, then you're going to feel safer to go back to the bigger stuff in your past And we're not just rehashing events, we're applying a very specific process that allows you to go back into the experience and allow the emotions to come up that weren't expressed, okay, that weren't processed. So if you build safety in the small stuff, you build capacity, you build safety to go back into your past. And re-traumatization doesn't even have to be on your radar because you've built trust in yourself. Okay. So this, I hope, addresses the question of, isn't this re-traumatizing to go back and rehash your events? First of all, we're not rehashing events. And there are ways to work with this. So I said the 3 reasons to summarize that you might be thinking this is because you've actually experienced re-traumatization or what you call re-traumatization yourself. And that could be true. It could be that you've been in a group and you've witnessed someone get re traumatized, or you've had a friend tell you about their experience of re traumatization. The third piece is that a lot of people that come into this world, you're already very well educated in the world of emotions. Sometimes I feel like better than me, that you've heard about this happening. And so this all results in a fear of re traumatizing yourself. And there are ways around it. And sometimes you need support and guidance to be able to work around it. And sometimes it's just coming back to the simplest things. And it's not always about going for that big event. It is just starting on some of the most mundane, easy things. Build safety and trust in your body so that you've got safety and trust to go for the bigger stuff. This applies to anything in life. Okay. So I'm not going to make you go back and process things that are too big, too challenging. That's just going to be a hot mess and it's not going to help you. And that is where when I am interacting with people and they share their history with me, I am able to work out what would be a good release for you to start with, what would be one that's a little bit more challenging, and we save that for a little bit later. And I'll tell you when I feel like you're ready, or you'll just know when you're ready and you go for it. But I think that sometimes this is where people are like, nope, I want to give this a go. And you give it a go and it might work really well for you. And other times you actually set yourself back because when you get re traumatized, if this is actually what's happening, it stops you functioning properly day to day, and you need time to recoup from that. So, that is my view on whether or not going back into your past is re traumatizing. And I don't believe it has to be if you're following a structure and a process where you gain safety. Eventually, the structure and process can become a lot more intuitive, but don't jump to that, just start. Hopefully, you can hear like these themes in my podcast episodes is where people just make the end result so big, so far away that they don't start. And when you're in pain, sometimes you need some guidance and support for someone to share with you, this is what you need to do first. Can you trust it? The people that have had some of the crazy, amazing results and walked a journey that I couldn't even predict, the people that I've been getting on my podcast recently and some in the past, they just trusted the process. They trusted the steps and now they are being a lot more intuitive with it. But they're no longer scared to deal with their past because they have seen how the world changes around them, how they are able to break patterns as a result of processing their emotions. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you got something out of it. I hope that if maybe at the start you were a little bit activated by my view of trauma, that you were able to stay in this and get curious. And if ever you are in one of my free spaces where you get an opportunity to have live coaching, to be able to interact, I really appreciate to have the conversation because talking about re-traumatizing is like someone asking me about a condition that has a million different presentations. I want to speak to your unique experience. I want to be able to interact with you. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this episode on is going back into your past and processing your emotions, rehashing events, and re traumatizing. In short, it doesn't have to be.